What is up, everybody? Welcome to week 12 of the Blogger Bowl. Week 12. It is so sad. It feels like just yesterday we were preparing to talk about the college football season, doing conference previews, wondering just how bad Colorado was going to be. And they are bad, so at least there's that. But I love how short Phil's sitting right now, by the way.
Yeah, you do look really short. You look like a short
Raise
kid.
up the chair a little. There we go. It's a little better here. Let me.
Maybe you guys just have big heads.
Oh, there you go. Well, no, there's no denying that. Matt, what size
that's
fitted
much
do you
better.
wear?
What size what?
Fitted hat do you wear?
Either depending on the actual hat, because sometimes they go back and forth, 7.5 or 7.25.
Three-quarter, or 7.25.
No, the smaller ones, so 7.25.
Oh.
Usually 7.5.
I'm a like a 7.75 guy usually. I've got a gigantic cranium. Although this is a weird factoid, I think Bruce Bochy, the manager of the Rangers who just won the World Series, had like the largest head ever measured. His fitted hat is over an 8.
That's a massive head.
Yeah, Bruce Bochy apparently has got a massive cranium.
Big brain, smart guy. World Series.
Guy. Exactly. That's why he's won so many World Series. So we were completely
White Sox didn't want to call him though. White Sox didn't think he was worth it.
Well, no, I mean they've just got to go hire Reinsdorf's friends who might be drunk on the bench. And
hey, this time it was Pedro Grifol.
Oh, I don't know. I couldn't. You could have given me a million guesses, and I don't know that I would have ever come up with the name Pedro Grifol.
Yeah, you
so
don't have to know him.
There's that. Like, it's kind of funny. We're going to talk baseball here for a minute. It's kind of baseball. Funny sometimes. Just some of the names of coaches that you're just like, I had no idea that guy was the manager of the team. It kind of goes that way with the NBA too sometimes, but never.
Yeah, it's weird. When we were like growing up when I was a kid, I feel like I knew every manager, every coach, like every starting lineup, every starting rotation, and now I'm like, I just know football, and that's kind of it. Hockey, and then everywhere else, I just kind of know some stuff.
I barely know anything. So on that note, are you guys ready to talk some turkey?
Oh.
I like how Matt's not even paying attention and doesn't see this.
I saw the turkey hat. Sorry.
Oh, this is my dogs. I'm in feast mode, guy. What was that?
Matt just had no reaction to it. Just shrugged off a turkey hat.
Matt looks great.
Matt is pretty much unfazed by anything.
I'm focused in on football. I'm unfazed.
So for next week's show, I'm going to be on the road. We're going to do one show next week because it's Thanksgiving. I'm going to be on the road, and this is my dog's hat. This doesn't come to Minnesota with me, so I'm wearing it now.
That's fair.
All right. 2 big games this weekend, and then we each have one game we all want to opine on, talk about whatever, and then we'll have our bets, of course. The big game of the week, guys, Pac-12 vengeance. I cannot wait for this. Washington at Oregon State. The crowd at Reser Stadium is going to be insane because the Civil War this year is in Eugene. So this is it. This is Oregon State's opportunity to affect the Pac-12 title race. They've already, by the way, won this week because the judge ruled in favor of Washington State and Oregon State. So they have control of all of the Pac-12 assets, and they're going to get all of the money from the Pac-12 this year, and it's great. And they should spend it in the most irresponsible ways ever. Just buy bounce houses and just put a ton of bounce houses inside their stadiums. I don't know. I haven't thought this thing through very well, but this game's going to be super intense, and I cannot wait for it. Oregon State, guys, has the #1 rushing success rate in college football. Damian Martinez is coming off his best game of the season against Stanford, 146 yards, 4 touchdowns. They ran for 277 yards as a team. Washington, 114th in rush defense success rate. Both Oregon and USC ran for over 200 yards against them. Was kind of surprised to discover when I was kind of putting my notes together for this that DJ Uiagalelei, guys, tied for 11th in PFF passing grade on 20-plus yard throws. On 48 attempts, he has 19 big-time throws and just 3 turnover-worthy plays. Oregon State, 9th in pass plays explosiveness. So the game plan is very simple. Run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Play action, deep shots. I think they run play action 40% of their pass plays. The only thing Oregon State, though, does really well on defense is sack the quarterback. They're 8th in sack percentage, but Washington has given up sacks on less than 2% of their dropbacks. So they're not going to be able to get after. Nobody's been able to get after Michael Penix Jr. this year. They do force some turnovers. Oregon State does. We know Penix is liable to throw them as well. But this one has as we get close to this game kind of feels like the game where it's not even going to be an upset at this point, where everyone's expecting Washington to lose this game on the road, and they've just been waiting, and everyone's expecting it, and then it kind of feels like it's just going to happen. Matt, what are your thoughts?
I think I feel like that's a pretty perfect way to break it down. Like Washington just feels like Oregon State, I feel like is Utah, but just better at just about everything they do, at least this year. Like I think they're a little bit better defensively. I think their offense is a little bit better. Like they take care of the football a little better. And Utah just went into Washington and like gave them everything they could handle and almost came away with a win there. So now going on the road to Oregon State, and like you were saying, Oregon State's one of two Super Bowls, like back to back here with them and then Oregon. Like I've been on Washington's train all year, and like I got the Washington shirt, and I think I said they were my Huskies, though they haven't been my Huskies to the extent the Vols were my Vols last year. I want to back them up, but this feels like a really, really tough spot. I'd be very worried for Washington.
And it's almost like the law of averages has to hit at some point. I mean, Washington in the last 6 games has essentially won 6 one-score games in a row. The only ones that weren't one score were USC, which I mean was a toss up there for a minute, and same with Stanford. Right? It's like every single one of those games in the last 6 they could have lost and they won. So are they the Minnesota Vikings this year? Like kind of, right? It's been fantastic to watch, and almost in like if I was a true Washington fan, I know Matt, you dabbled in it for a second. You're just riding this like wave of stress. Like you've had a clenched butt for 6 weeks straight, and this week's going to be no different. And you look at the spread and you see why Oregon State's favored, and it's like everything is just lining up to they can't keep. I want to say getting away with this, but they can't keep winning close against, for the most part, some pretty good teams, but also some bad teams. So you want to say that they're just going to lose this game, but I'm just going to say they're going to keep riding this ridiculous wave, and it's going to be a 3-point game late, and they're going to pull it off with a Michael Penix touchdown late. Or again, DJ Uiagalelei has been under 60% passing this season, but has only thrown 4 interceptions. So you look at that number, and those are a bit off, right? Like a not very accurate quarterback who just hasn't thrown a lot of interceptions. And similar to kind of that law of averages, I think that catches up with him. So I think a late turnover by DJ, who has been playing a lot better, I'm very happy for him. But when you just look at the numbers and look at the streak that Washington's going on right now, being in these close games and winning these close games where Oregon State has lost 2 of those close games, I just think Washington has the edge and experience to pull this one out. Now getting to the Pac-12, Pac-2 now? We saying Pac-2?
2-pack.
2-pack. Okay, 2-pack. Getting to the Pac-2 title game, I think that's going to be a different story with Washington, but I do think they finish out the regular season undefeated here.
This kind of feels to me like, Phil, a little bit better, a better team, but kind of like Notre Dame's 2013, like when they just kept like win. No, I'm not trying to bring this back to Notre Dame, but like a team that kind of like started hot, but then just kind of kept hanging on, like kept winning these really tight games, and you thought the law of averages would even out, and then they ended up not, but then they went to not a playoff, a national championship, and got the doors blown off them by a really good team.
Yeah.
And that feels like what might happen to Washington. Like they might win this game. They might steal one here. They might get their way through undefeated and get to a playoff. But it feels like once they play, I mean, Oregon could be that really good team. Like once they get back and play a very good team, they might kind of just get smoked, and the house of cards kind of comes crumbling down. And I hate calling Washington a house of cards because they are a pretty good football team. They're just they're like you said, last year's Vikings. They just kind of keep stealing these 1-score games.
And that's where I think, again, I think they run into the buzzsaw against Oregon in the 2-pack title game. But the one thing which does stick with me, why I'm just sticking with Washington in this situation, is I've been on football teams where you constantly find a way to win these really close games. And it is something where there's just a constant belief of we're going to get this done. We're somehow going to figure this out. And when you have an elite quarterback, it becomes much easier. But I've also been on the side where you're constant on teams who constantly lose those close games. And it's very much a mindset and a mentality and like a toughness that gets built up. And over the course,
especially in a college game,
like this is pretty unprecedented when it looks at the stretch of the last 6 games that like, they're a coin flip away from losing 6 games.
They really are.
I mean, it was the TCU thing from last year. I think there's a couple of teams who are like that.
That's
like,
a good comp.
I'll talk about another one later. I mean, their wins haven't been as kind of chaotic. We haven't had the fire drill field goal thing that TCU had last year. But there are a couple of teams who are in contention for this. Obviously, when I do that, that means I'm going to be talking about a team that's right outside the rankings a little bit later that's been playing with fire as well. But like eventually, like variance is a motherfucker. And like if you put yourself in that situation, it's tough. And I really think that this environment on Saturday night is going to be awesome. And shame on, and you guys know, like I worked on College Game Day for 5 years. I loved working on that show. I'm very proud of what I did working on that show, and I hold that show in high esteem, but shame on them for not being there this week.
Wait, game days. Wait, how did I miss this?
They're at James
Game days
Madison.
at James Madison, which like James Madison's a great story and all that, but whatever. And the Jonas Brothers are performing. I'm a big Joe bro, so I appreciate it. My favorite Jonas brother is Frankie, who's the one who's not talented, who co-hosts Claim to Fame with one of the other brothers on ABC.
Sure.
God, it's a terrible show, but it's so entertaining. But like this is the center of college football. This is where college football is right now. This is the game that matters the most. And it's been the biggest story in football this year. It's the dissolution of the Pac-12 is the big story, and this is the big game, and this is basically a game to potentially stay alive in the playoff race for Washington, because I think we all think that Oregon is probably going to win in a rematch. They got to win this. And I think even if Washington loses this game, you don't want to leave anything to chance. You don't want to leave anything to the idea of you're Washington and you're going up against Texas, who is a big money, a big program that brings eyeballs and all that kind of stuff. Like you get into the weird stuff. So they've got to handle their business here. But man,
one loss Washington, I think, has next to no chance.
If they lose this game and if they beat Oregon twice, maybe, but like you just can't leave it to chance.
Yeah, and there's just too much. There's too much muck in the committee, like in the rankings right now. And I know we say every year, it'll settle itself out, but like this year more than any other. And I know we're not big, like let's talk about the rankings, but like there are so many teams that have viable arguments to get in, that are playing really good football, and like this might not get sorted out. Like there is a very real chance that Michigan beats Ohio State by 3, and then both teams have a valid argument to get in the playoff. That Alabama beats Georgia by 3, and both teams have valid arguments. That Texas wins the Big 12 and has a valid argument. That Florida State runs the table and is undefeated and has a valid argument. That Oregon wins the Pac-12 and has one loss. Like this feels like the most somebody got ripped off or screwed since the first playoff when Ohio State jumped Baylor and TCU. The
only reason that feels like it might happen in my mind is because this is the last year we're doing 4 like that, and finally we're moving on from 4 next year, and this will be the year where it's like, well, there's a bunch of teams, and like teams, if you want to say Georgia and Michigan are on a tier by themselves, whatever, that's fine. If you want to say Ohio State's there as well, but it's like this is a year where teams like 3 through 8, 3 through 7, 3 through 8 can all beat each other. And like you can't tell me that any one of those teams are any better. Like Texas can beat Florida State. Texas could lose to Iowa State on Saturday. Like Alabama can beat anybody in the country, I think, on the right day. Like, and so to your point, like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where it is. And we're either going to get the blood week this week, which would be Washington losing this game, our next game, which is going to be Georgia, Tennessee, Georgia losing in Knoxville, and then Texas losing in Ames to knock 3 teams out of it. Or I don't know how many times. So Blood Week is a thing that Jason Kirk, who I don't even know which publication he writes for now, he used to be SB Nation, does Shutdown Fullcast. There's basically 1 year every year in college football where a bunch of top 10 teams lose.
Yeah.
He calls it the Blood Week, and there hasn't been.
We haven't had it yet. Yeah.
And like it would be, I mean, I hope it's not this week, but if there's a Blood Week, it's going to involve Texas because they have 2 tough games left. But like it would be kind of remarkable if it was next week. Like Ohio State beats Michigan and Georgia were to like somehow, or that's not going to happen, but like Alabama loses to Auburn somehow.
Yeah.
Like it would be crazy. It would be chaotic. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. It still has time to play out. You guys know I hate scenario season. I refuse to kind of indulge it right now, but I will admit that does kind of feel for the first time in a very, very long time, if ever, that we might not get resolution going into championship Saturday.
Also, it's like tinfoil hat season for me too. It's like you
pop put it on.
Now. This one's not extreme. It's not too extreme, but it's like you look at the push for the 12-team playoff. What better to get massive support and like excitement around a 12-team playoff than a shit show trying to select the final 4? And so then they can say, this is tough decisions, teams getting screwed, everyone's excited. And granted, I've been excited for the 12-team playoff since they announced it, just because it's more football and I think it's better. But again, in a situation like this, you wish it was this year. Like it would make people are saying, I think some people's arguments like, oh, there's some meaningless games at the end of the year. It's like, no, the big game's so much more meaningful because teams
you'd have like
5 through 18 right now are all like in the hunt. And I think it
and
just
I get that like
exciting.
Michigan, Ohio State this year might not hold as much, but like it's still Michigan, Ohio State, and if they're still 2 top 5 teams, they're still playing for seeding and a bye and like all it does is make like Missouri, the rest of Missouri's schedule that much more intriguing and be like, oh man, like who's going to be the team that 3-loss team that sneaks in that nobody wants to play.
Yeah, who like exactly, right? And it's the same thing. You almost look at like, hey, LSU could have a run because Jaden Daniels got knocked out of
Brian Kelly wouldn't do that.
He wouldn't, but I want to see Jaden. I guess what I'm saying is I want to see Jaden Daniels in more big games.
Yeah.
To that point, it's funny that you bring up Missouri because I'm looking at this and Fox put it out yesterday, which means it's probably wrong, but nevertheless, here's based on the rankings currently, the college football playoff, if we have the 12 team this year, Georgia, Ohio State, Florida State, and Washington would be your 4 first-round buys. Your 6-11 game would be Oregon, Oregon State, so I think you can go ahead and say that's not going to happen. The 5-12 game is Michigan, Tulane, which would just be funny watching the Willie Fritz off.
Of course, Michigan would luck into it.
The 7-10 game is Texas and Louisville, and then the 8-9 game is Alabama, Missouri. So if the chalk
game would rock.
Yeah, if the chalk were to hold there, you'd get Georgia and Alabama, Washington versus Michigan, Florida State versus Oregon, and Ohio State versus Texas in the quarterfinals. And I think that gives you kind of the picture that we're asking for here, right? Like, you want to see Florida State versus Oregon, who's better, Georgia or Texas and Ohio State, which team is better? Like, you get that. So I'm all for it. I agree with the sentiment that it makes more team seasons matter. I think that if there's a good way where the players can get their share of the revenue from this and we take into consideration player safety to the best of our ability, I'm actually in favor of a 16-team format where every conference gets a seat at the table, because that way it means, look, I know the MAC champion's going to get the 16 seed every year and like Toledo is not going to beat Georgia, but to get to go to Athens and play there for those kids in the playoff would be the memory of a lifetime. And it would make that matter instead of going to the fucking Quick Lane Bowl or whatever Detroit game they'd get to go to. I think it would be very cool, and I'd like to see it.
Let's not rip on the Little Caesars Bowl. Okay, that's one of my favorites.
As someone who's like obviously watched the FCS playoffs for as long as I can remember, it's just awesome. And moving to the 16-team playoff, you might get some like stinky first-round matchups, but like it's just it's another football game, and most likely than not, it's going to be a really intriguing matchup that you would otherwise never get. And like again, like for me as a Holy Cross fan, like Holy Cross going and playing at South Dakota State, my brother went to South Dakota State to watch that game, and he's like, that was one of the coolest experiences that I'll ever get. And so I think it's an awesome experience, not just for the teams, but also just true fans of college football, being able to go to these like unique venues and see matchups that will never happen in a regular season, or they would happen in a meaningless bowl game. And now you have intense meaning around a very unique matchup in college football, which I think brings it back to the bowl season that we grew up watching before players were opting out. And I'm fine with that. I'm not anti that, but just watching some of those cool games and matchups with players made every single one of those games must watch. And now it shifts that narrative to then the 12-team playoff, 16-team playoff. Every single one of those games becomes a must-watch.
I agree completely. I will say one thing they do need to fix with the 12-team. The only games on campus are going to be the first-round games. So the teams that get buys don't get home games, which they need to change that. Everything up until this, if you want to do the semifinals at bowl sites, that's fine. I think every game up until the finals.
I'm just happy there's at least some sort of on-campus home.
Oh, absolutely, for sure.
That needed to happen.
And that's another reason why I like playoff expansion is like for the team. So like it would be, I mean, Alabama is a great example here. Michigan for the last couple of years, like it's expensive. Like the playoff games this year are the Fiesta Bowl and the Rose Bowl. And I mean, I know for Georgia fans, it's old hat, but like for who's going to be Florida State fans, they haven't been to the playoffs since the first year, right? Because they won the BCS title game and then Jameis had the fumble against Oregon. So they haven't been in 8 years. And so for those Florida State fans, if hypothetically, if they were to play Michigan and beat them, let's just go crazy, they would have to fly to Arizona. And then the national title game is in, I don't know where that national title game is, Tampa, maybe. Regardless, it's expensive. This opens up the possibility that more fans get to experience the playoff in person. which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of the playoff, the number 1 team in the new college football playoff standings, the Georgia Bulldogs, got elevated after an impressive win over Ole Miss. They head to Rocky Top, where the living legend, the queen herself, Dolly Parton, will be performing Rocky Top on Saturday. Hammer the Vols plus the 10.5. No, I'm just kidding.
Maybe though.
No.
Maybe,
No.
No. It's the kombucha girl gift. 10.5 is the spread there. The total currently, I think it was 58.5. I lost it. It was in front of me a second ago. This one, real simple handicap for me, guys. Tennessee last year was the best team at scoring in the red zone and on quality possessions in college football. They scored touchdowns on 79% of their red zone trips last year, which is absolutely insane. And they were 5th in quality possessions. This year, they are just 59th in quality possessions and like 117th in points per quality possession. They've gone from scoring touchdowns on 79% of their red zone trips to 50% of their red zone trips this year. If Tennessee cannot put the ball in the end zone against Georgia, they're not going to win this game, which is like, duh, of course. They can't settle for field goals. They're going to have to take some chances. They're going to have to hit some big plays. They can run the ball pretty decently, which was kind of surprising to me, to at least from a metric standpoint. But Georgia's defense, 69.57% of red zone drives end in touchdowns. So they give up touchdowns, but they just don't give up a lot of those possessions, just 23. So Tennessee, you cannot leave points on the board in this game. You've got to get the ball in the end zone. You've got to be able to move the ball through the air and on the ground. I mean, Joe Milton, I'm just like, what it comes down to for me, guys, is like, maybe this is just Neyland Stadium magic. Maybe the fact that Tennessee is just so much better at home than they are on the road is a reason to be optimistic that Tennessee might be able to pull off an upset, keep this game close. I just don't know that they're going to be able to go score for score with a Georgia offense that we've seen nobody be able to stop yet.
Yeah, I don't think this one's close. I think I would take the spread up to 16.5. Wow. I got thinking about that today. I that's really where I am right now. Like, I just don't, I just don't see Tennessee being able to keep up with the Georgia offense consistently. Like, I don't see Joe Milton be able to consistently do that and make big throws throughout this game against this defense. Kirby Smart, I think we were like, is Georgia good? Are they? In the last couple of weeks, they've kind of laughed in our faces. So I'm fully on the train that Georgia's going to absolutely roll. I see them winning by 13-17 with a late touchdown or turnover, because I see it being like a 9 to 10 point game in the midway through the third, maybe the late third quarter. And Tennessee, like, hey, if you don't score a touchdown on this drive, it's over. And either having a backbreaking turnover or just not getting a 4th down conversion at like their own 40-yard line, and Georgia turning around and scoring and stomping on their grave. That's just really how I see this game playing out in my head.
Yeah, and like, Dan, we talked about Tuesday, or at least made mention to Georgia going into Auburn, as tough place to play, tough test for them early. And like, Carson Beck was okay and the offense wasn't great, but then they turned it on late. I feel like Carson Beck has grown up so much since that game, and he's just gotten better every week, that like, I'm not really too worried about him going into this hostile environment, especially with his safety net and Brock Bowers like back healthy and playing. I don't trust Joe Milton to consistently take care of the football and make big plays. Like, he can make big plays, but he's never really been able to take care of the football. Tennessee's defense is much better this year, and unfortunately, I wish this defense was their defense last year, because that could have been a playoff team and probably would have been, but that's not the case. But just offensively, I don't think they can hang with Georgia.
Also, it's not a night game. If this was a night game, I think I would have kind of the, Dolly Parton.
It isn't, but also like the 2:30 SEC game is like the equivalent of a night game, I feel like.
True, but I think just from more of a nerve standpoint, for someone like Carson Beck going into that environment, seeing all of the orange and at night,
CBS needs to air that Dolly Parton.
Yeah, I know. I want to see that more than I want to watch this game. Actually, not really.
It's close. It's
schedule
close.
Management, by the way, this week. I know there's not a lot of meat on the bone this week, but like, all of the games I want to watch are at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, except for the Georgia game. Like the Texas game, the Washington game, LSU, Georgia State, which I kind of want to follow. Florida, Missouri, which has potential to be exceptionally stupid, is also at night. Like Clemson, North Carolina is a 3:30 game, which It's fine, like whatever. The early slate's not great. I will later on talk about a game on ESPN Plus that everyone should check out. That's it in terms of games that I think we all agree are big games this week. We each picked one game that we wanted to talk about that wasn't one of these games for whatever reason. I don't know why Matt and Phil picked their games. They probably know why I picked my game. I picked the Texas game, but I'll talk about my game last. Phil, which game did you? I know which games you guys are talking about. I don't remember who picked which one.
So I'm talking about UCLA USC in the absolute California Losers Bowl.
Yeah, vibes not great.
No. And so it's, for me, this is just an intriguing matchup because it was leaked that Chip Kelly is going to be fired after this season with multiple games left. That's always weird when it leaks. It's like, hey, we're going to fire this coach after the season. And the coach is kind of sitting there and having to field questions from the media about job security.
Yeah, just fire him. Like, why?
Exactly. If you're going to do it, just let him go now. Don't.
Unless Chip leaked it.
It's just a very uncomfortable situation, and I don't mind that for Chip Kelly. I don't mind that for UCLA. And also, you look at USC; it's like they were undefeated, and now have just like stumbled, and it's just fun to watch because for me, I don't like USC, but it was also very clear who they were early in the season. Despite, I think some people being like, "Well, who's going to stop this offense?" It's like, well, they're not going to stop anyone, and this offense is not as elite as it should be. And so watching that fall from grace has been fun as a Notre Dame fan, but also with Alex Grinch being fired too, it's just kind of sort of like a loser bowl, but also like sort of a reset for both these teams. And it's just interesting because it's like, which team cares less? In a way, is why I'm intrigued with this game, because there's already been reports that UCLA players are going to be flooding the transfer portal. And USC is, what are they really playing for at this point? In their minds, they had like national championship playoff hopes. And so like, what are they really playing for? And Dan has a question. So Dan.
No, I have the answer to this, but finish. I know why. I found the angle.
Okay. What's the angle? Go for it.
The angle. Do you guys realize this is Caleb Williams' last college game?
Who do they play next week?
They don't play next week. They were supposed to play BYU next week, but BYU canceled the game because they got accepted into the Big 12. So USC replaced them with San Jose State in week 0. So USC doesn't play next week, and Caleb Williams more than likely won't play in a bowl game, particularly if they end up in the Alamo Bowl to play Oklahoma, which is a realistic possibility right now.
He'd cowered out of that real fast.
Very, very likely watching Caleb Williams' last college game on Saturday. And regardless of how you feel about him, the writing the F word on his fingernails, I think is funny. Like, whatever, him crying after a game, like people dogging him for that's just bullshit in my mind. Like, he cares. He does. He's, he's been awesome to watch. And I hate Lincoln Riley. And his first, his breakout moment came against Texas. That really, really sucked. But he is, regardless of how you feel about him, it is undeniable that he has been one of the most exciting players to watch in college football for the last couple of years. And Saturday is going to be the last time we get to see him on a college football field, very likely. So
I will say, if he played anywhere other than SC, I wouldn't hate him, but he plays at SC. That's a rivalry thing.
Yeah.
Just want that on the record. It's nothing against him. It's the
and potential the Bears might get him. The Bears might get him. So Matt and I on the record of potentially loving him. The record of potentially
I don't now, but I am on the record of could be swayed.
Yeah. So I think there's that. And the other thing on the Chip Kelly thing, I was thinking about this today. So right now we have Mississippi State's open. We have A&M is open.
You see the Jamie Chadwell tweet?
That was a Photoshop.
That was I got. Okay, that was hilarious though.
Arkansas is probably going to open. Boise State's open. San Diego State's open. If UCLA does open, I'm willing to go on the record now and say they're going to have the weirdest process and the hire that comes out of nowhere, just based on history, right? Their last 3 full-time hires were Rick Neuheisel, who got hired after he was fired by Washington for NCAA violation stuff. Jim Mora, who had been fired by 2 NFL teams, including a 1-year stint in Seattle, and then Chip Kelly, who had been fired after 2 NFL jobs, including a 1-year stint in San Francisco. We kind of know
Fisher to UCLA.
Huh?
Jimbo Fisher to UCLA.
I think A&M's not gonna stray too far. I don't think from the list that people think. I don't think there's going to be a weird hire at Mississippi State, or if Arkansas opens up, or San Diego State and Boise State should just either hire the offensive coordinator from Washington. Ryan Grubb has been targeted a lot, and Jason Eck, the coach at Idaho, are names. They're going to do something relatively normal. UCLA, if that job does open up, is going to be super weird because that's what UCLA does when they hire coaches. So
I was looking up a name here because Chris Peterson getting a phone call from them would make a whole lot of sense. Taking them into the Big Ten. He's been a stable coach. I know he's retired, but he's not really retired. And I feel like his name comes up, especially with schools out West a lot. Like, I feel like that would be a hire for them that makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure, but that's also why they wouldn't call him and would go hire John Fox. But I don't know.
I'm trying to think of like Matt Eberflus. There you go.
Matt Nagy, UCLA head
Nagy.
coach.
Matt, Mark Trestman.
Oh, that'd be hilarious.
Just bad Bears coaches. They should go see if Arthur Smith wants to coach in college football. Matt, so you're also staying in the Pac-12 with your game. Which one are we talking?
Utah, Arizona. On it, like no like real deep dive reason into this one, other than just I think it's gonna be a really fun football game. Like Utah's offense, granted, they were going up against Washington last week, whose defense we've already talked about. Like Utah's offense has been getting better. Bryson Barnes, the pig farmer, has been getting better. Their defense, they're not the elite Utah unit we've come to know and love under Kyle Whittingham, but they play pretty hard. They're very well coached, and Arizona's been like sneaky, one of the most, if not the most fun teams in college football this year. Noah Fafita's awesome. I just think this is going to be a really fun Pac-12 football game. It's one that I'm also sad is at, I believe, 1:30 Central Time, so at 11:30 local. This was a perfect 8:30 p.m. kickoff, 9:30 p.m. for you guys kickoff. No idea why this is not under the lights in Tucson. And a 63-54 final score, but this one's just going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to watching these two teams.
Yeah, there won't be that many points in that game. If
it was after dark.
Oh, if it was at night, I gotcha.
No, 1:30. No, but if it were a 9:30 kickoff.
If I remember to look it up, to bring it up again next week or put it on the card, I will try to make a note to remember it. There's no Pac-12 after dark game this week. There's not a late Pac-12 game.
Does Hawaii play late? Is Hawaii on the island?
San Jose State, I think, is the late game.
Yeah. Regardless,
I wish Arizona didn't lose to Mississippi State. Just throwing that out there.
We still have. Let's see. Is there a TBD Pac-12 game? So Colorado, Utah, and Arizona State are still timed TBD. But guys, we get one of just the all-time Pac-12. If this is our last ever legit Pac-12 after dark game next week, boy howdy are they going out with Pac-12 after dark ass football. Cal at UCLA.
Ooh, that's
what
grossly
a job.
awesome.
In the Rose Bowl, we're ending Pac-12 after dark in the Rose Bowl.
There's going to be 12 people there.
Something so fitting. There's going to be nobody there.
It'll be Dante Moore's last game with UCLA.
Except for recruits trying to steal stuff out of the Cal locker rooms.
Wildest story in the world.
Their own locker room, probably.
I mean,
something tells me the Cal players are not going to have quite the jewelry that the Colorado players did. I feel like, Shedeur, you see what he wears all the time. He wore a Rolex in the game.
Ice on his wrist. All right. So my game, I have nothing else to add. I would like to watch that game for sure. Although if it's that time, it's on the Pac-12 network, isn't it? The Arizona.
Yeah, you're probably. Oh, let's see.
Or is it like an early Fox? No, because Fox is at noon.
Fox has big noon kick. Fuck, it's on the Pac-12 network.
Well, Matt, we have to get our free Fubo TV trial to get the Pac-12 the 2-pack network, whatever. a Freudian shit there.
You guys remember Fubo?
Oh yeah, I do.
All right, so my game, I was going to leave this well alone. I bet on this game. I was going to leave this well alone. And then I saw a video from a player on Iowa State. So I had to talk about the Texas-Iowa State game. Iowa State beat Texas in Austin in 2020. And after the game, Breece Hall said, quote, "It's 5-star culture versus 5-star players," end quote. The next year, Iowa State beat Texas 30-7 in Ames. And audio of Texas defensive line coach Bo Davis went viral when he cussed out players on the bus afterwards who were laughing and joking after getting their asses beat and embarrassed. Texas barely survived last year's game and ended a 3-game losing streak to Iowa State. Iowa State's offensive lineman Jared Hufford stoked the fire this week. He said that since he's been there at Iowa State, the two most important games for them have been Iowa and Texas. And he said that Texas thinks that their shit don't stink. Shit was my added. He censored himself, but that's what he was saying. Here's the thing. The Iowa State offensive line has not been very good this year. They're 116th in rushing success rate. They're dead last in the country in percentage of runs that get stopped at the line of scrimmage. 25% of their runs, guys, get stuffed at the line of scrimmage. And yet there's a guy out here talking shit when he has to go up against Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, which is 670 pounds of future NFL Texas beef in the middle. But that's how they feel. They're confident and they hate Texas. So once again, guys, I'm begging Texas, please embrace being the villain. This is a place that you have not played well. At the same time, this is a team that does not have the talent to compete with you if you go out and play your best game. Kind of. Why kind of? Texas has a couple of big injuries that are going to affect this game. Jonathan Brooks developed into one of the best running backs in college football this year, but he tore his ACL against TCU last week. CJ Baxter's a really talented freshman, but Brooks was kind of a get out of jail free card for the Texas offense. When they weren't moving the ball well, they could just kind of give him the ball and he could make some things happen. That puts more pressure on Quinn Ewers, who I still don't think is very healthy. He did sling it a little bit last week, but probably still only about 80%. And the run game should struggle a little bit because I don't think they're going to let Ewers scramble because they don't want him to get hurt again. So I took the points with Iowa State earlier in the week when it was 8.5. Texas has struggled to finish games 3 of the last 4 weeks. It's a hostile environment against an opponent who has played well against them as of late. And as much as I really, really want them to embrace it, I'm not sure that Texas has that villain in them.
I'm kind of with you. Like, and now I don't watch Texas obviously nearly as closely as you do, but it feels a lot like me and Phil's fandom with Notre Dame, where they play these teams they should blow out, but they let them just hang around for too long and they don't embrace that villain role, and the games end up being a lot closer than they should be, even though Texas is the significantly better team. It feels like every time Texas plays Ohio State or goes there, or honestly any Big 12 contender that goes to Iowa State late in the season, early in the season, whatever, just has a nightmare of a time. And I think Texas wins the football game. They're the better football team. But there's just something about going to Ames when you're a very good team with a lot to play for that gets weird and tricky.
So
nothing to add there.
So we transition there into the bets. That is one of 4 bets that I have for this week. Guys, I'm going to take Michigan. I'm going to lay the 19.5. I don't care how many points they're laying at Maryland.
You get 19 at DraftKings. Give you the
there you go.
there.
It's down to 19. Is Talia Tagovailoa the best quarterback Michigan's going to play in the regular season this year?
Probably.
Yeah. It's really gross, right?
So that's
nevertheless,
hilarious.
You guys know that one of my mantras in college football is that 90% of coaching is waging psychological warfare on your own players. Michigan's victim complex is insufferable, but from a coaching standpoint, I think the Michigan versus everybody thing is much more of a thing this week than it was last week. It's easy to get up for the Penn State game. It's one of your big games of the season. Less easy to get up for an early sandwich game at Maryland between Penn State and Ohio State. So I think the victimhood bullshit galvanizes Michigan, and there's no letdown against a Maryland team that's doing Maryland things. They started 5-0, then lost 4 straight, including another loss.
So disappointing. That team should be fun.
They do it every year, dude. It's what they do.
know, but they should be fun.
Yeah. They did beat Nebraska last week, but the vibes are not good. My next bet, I'm taking Louisville on the money line. It's -110 at Miami. Miami's probably more talented, sure, but man, it really feels like last week was the last gasp of any kind of competitiveness we're going to see or fight anyway from Miami. They were game against Florida State, but ultimately not good enough to win. I don't think playing spoiler to Louisville's ACC title game hopes is going to get their chili hot, if you know what I mean. I think Braum versus Cristobal is a coaching mismatch in favor of Louisville. Hard Rock Stadium is going to be half empty, and I think we might see Miami call it a season. And then, guys, I'm taking LSU -17.5 in the first half. LSU -17.5 in the first half against Georgia State. I played it at 16.5, but I'd play the 17.5 that existed as of last night at FanDuel. Handicap is simple here. LSU is really pushing the Jaden Daniels for the Heisman Trophy thing right now. Brian Kelly is all in on it, largely to distract from how the defense cost them a shot at doing anything special this year. Nevertheless, I expect them to come out balls to the wall against my mom and dad's alma mater this week, poor Georgia State. The Panthers have given up over 40 points in each of their last 3 games. It feels like LSU can pick their number and hit it. My only worry laying the full game spread here is that LSU's defense is so bad and liable to give up points in garbage time. So I think it's like a 28-7, 35-14 kind of first half for them as Jaden Daniels just absolutely torches them. I do want to talk about one more game, but I don't really have a bet on it yet. So, Phil, what do we got on your card?
So first I have Wake getting 24.5 against Notre Dame.
Sam Hartman revenge game, Phil.
I think here's the thing. I've predicted. I think Sam Hartman plays a really good game. I don't see Notre Dame's offense
Did you see why Gerard Parker said he didn't call a ton of play action against Clemson?
because they played a bunch of man coverage.
Because they played man. Because apparently that means you can't run play action.
Yeah. So again, that's why I'm
so
laying
bad.
Wake Forest here. Like Dave Clawson's a good coach. It's going to be a little bit weird. I think Sam Hartman's going to be like a little shaken up right away, but I think he plays really well in this game. But I just don't see them winning.
It's helpful that he's at home.
Yeah, I just don't see them winning by more than 3 scores with the way their wide receivers have been playing. Like Wake's defense is not very good. Their offense is not very good. But like I'm going off of recency bias of the last 9 games of Notre Dame. They haven't played well on offense. I have I don't know if this is like reverse dead cat bounce game for Northwestern, who are getting 3 against Purdue. So their new head coach was officially hired, Braun. So he's coming in, and I think he's galvanized that team a little bit. And this gets them bowl eligibility. That'd be a huge win for a program that started in such disarray this year. Coming off a big win last week versus Wisconsin. So I like Northwestern in that spot. As mentioned, I have Georgia plus 10.5. I'll take that wherever it goes, up to 17 points. So love Georgia there. Now, especially knowing it's Caleb Williams' last game in college, would hammer USC -6, hammer them -6, just because I think UCLA does not give a shit about this game. Their coach is checked out. All the different players are Googling different college campuses that they want to be at, looking deep into Instagrams of the co-eds at those schools because they want to get as far away from UCLA as possible going into next year. And then Louisville +1, as you mentioned, Hard Rock Stadium is going to be empty. And this game's going to mean a ton for Louisville. Mario Cristobal stinks.
Does it worry you guys at all that Louisville is getting points? Like I know it's just 1, but like that line stinks.
It does stink.
Like I love it too much.
I just truly have no belief in Miami.
Yeah, same.
Miami's just been a program and a culture over the past few years. When they're down, they're out quickly.
I think if you look at the talent across both rosters, Miami's roster is just going to be so much better. There's going to have so many more talented players.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how much maybe they do care. Maybe because I know it's hard to not like care about football. I get it. Like we've all played to various levels, me much less competitively than the two of you did, but like we've all played and we've all been in situations like that. So it's like you don't want to really punt on it, but like But like, what
last
are they?
Week was
like,
kind of their Super Bowl, too,
right?
I guess.
Yeah, it's also when you look at in the transfer portal era, it's much easier for those super high level athletes who are underclassmen to just check out. Right? They're like, I'm out of here. We're not a winning program. I'm going in the portal. I don't really give a shit. So it's like for like UCLA and Miami, I see big like I don't give a shit games from their players because it's not like they're going to rally around their coaches either.
That's fair. My turn.
Yep, Matt.
All right, I'm going to take Louisville on the money line just because I might as well take the little bit of extra value there. I'm going to take Rutgers getting 20.5 at Penn State. Like defensively, I think they're really good. They gave Ohio State a pretty tough time. Like granted that was at home, but still like defensively they played Ohio State well. And like I think Drew Aller stinks, and he does stink. And I know Penn State's blown out some bad teams, but I don't think Rutgers is a bad football team. Where else am I here on DraftKings? I had over in Arizona, Utah, over 45. What else do I have? I have over 65.5 in USC, UCLA. As much as UCLA's players might not care, USC's defense is that bad where they will probably still score even if they don't care. North Carolina getting 7 at Clemson. I don't really know why I like that line, but I just, even with Clemson playing a little better, I don't think they should be giving 7 to a team to a quarterback like Drake May. I will lay the 10.5 with George with Phil. And Dan, you convinced me I'm hopping on that UCLA -7, or not UCLA, LSU -17.5 in the first.
There we go. Love it. The last game I want to talk about, I will throw out a hypothetical bet, but we don't have a line on this game yet. I can't believe I forgot to mention this game on Tuesday. I got so distracted by the Ferris State coaching thing. Forgot to mention this game. I will fully admit Oregon State, Washington's the best game of the weekend. I will make the argument that the second best game of the weekend is one of the elite rivalries in all of college football, a rivalry that's got the best name for any rivalry in college football. That is the Brawl of the Wild, Montana State visiting Montana. Sam Herder, the FCS editor at Hero Sports, has Montana projected as the 2 seed in the playoffs. Montana State is the 7 seed. So big national stakes here on top of the local bragging rights that matter so much. Montana 9-1 with a bad loss to Northern Arizona, but otherwise unblemished. A win gives them their first conference title since 2009. Montana State is 8-2 with a 4-point loss at number 1 South Dakota State and a 3-point loss at number 6 Idaho. Fun quarterback matchup here. Montana has the well-traveled Clifton McDowell, who raised some eyebrows calling this game the, quote, Battle of the Brawl. But you'll have to excuse a guy who's at Montana after stops at Louisiana Lafayette, Kilgore Junior College, and Central Arkansas for not being entirely up on the customs here. That juxtaposes against touchdown Tommy Malott from Montana State, a local kid who led them to the national title game a couple years ago. He's been banged up a bunch and shares the QB role with Sean Chambers. Home team has won 3 straight here. Sadly, the weather is supposed to be a pleasant high of 51 and partly sunny in Missoula, so we're not going to get snow, which is a bummer.
Wasn't game day at this game last year, and it was negative 12?
Yeah, it was miserable.
Nick Faldo was the guest picker because he has a house in Montana.
Yeah, a lot of rich people live out. The whole Yellowstone people. Lehigh fan. We'll get a lineup on Saturday morning. If it's less than 3.5, I just play some Montana money line just for fun. Real quick, by the way, the Pittsburgh-Boston College game tonight, I was looking for an angle in on that. I'd probably take Boston College minus plus the 3 because neither one of those teams should be favored by a score. They're threatening record highs today in Pittsburgh. It's like, ooh, is it going to be ugly, rainy, gross? Nope. It's going to be like 60-something degrees in Pittsburgh today. Nevertheless, Lehigh,
the weather needs to cooperate better this weekend.
Lehigh's like 2-8. They have to beat Lafayette to win to get Holy Cross the
automatic Patriot League bid. So
I was trying to remember what the league was.
Again, I'm very intrigued by that game. I actually can't believe I forgot to bring it up. It was on my list to bring up because, as you guys know, this is the 159th meeting between these teams, the oldest rivalry in college football, the most played game in college football history. Game day has been there. Lehigh is a bit squirrely this year. Lafayette is pretty good, admittedly. They've had a good season. They had a letdown against Colgate. They beat Holy Cross in a slop fest in which Holy Cross's quarterback ran for over 330 yards, but lost. So Holy Cross, honestly, has been pretty decimated by injuries to this year and has lost 2 close games against FBS opponents in the fourth quarter by under 4 points. So it's been a very weird season for me as a Holy Cross fan. But there is still a chance for them to get in the playoffs, but they need some help from Lehigh this weekend, who is not very good, has not been good in about 10 years. So we'll see what happens here. Lafayette has everything to play for. Weird things happen in this rivalry game. So I want everyone to band together and become a massive Lehigh fan this weekend so Holy Cross can get their 6th Patriot League title in a row and make the playoffs again this year. Again, I don't think this is the year that they make a lot of momentum in the playoffs, but it'll be interesting.
Never know. All you got to do is get in.
All you got to do is get in. And they've got multiple NFL players on that roster, but just not the complete roster that they've had in the last couple of years.
If you don't do it for Phil, do it for CJ McCollum. The Brawl of the Wild game is at 1:00, I believe. I got to double check that. I'm not sure if that was which time that was. I believe that's at 1:00. So if
ESPN Plus, probably.
Yeah, it's 100%. It's on ESPN Plus. I know that much for a fact. Let's see schedule. Sorry. Let's see 2 p.m. Eastern. So 2 p.m. Eastern. So by that point, Michigan will probably be up handily on Maryland, and maybe Louisville, Miami is the only other game with like real stakes going on in that window. So I just encourage you, if you do have ESPN Plus, to at least check that game out till you get to Georgia, Tennessee at 3:30. Give it an hour and a half of your time. It'll be intense. There'll be some good football played. It's a great rivalry. It's like the Iron Bowl for just for a smaller state, or at least a less populous state. It's obviously a bigger state land area wise. So you know us, we love all levels of college football. The D2 college football, the D2 and I think D3 playoffs start this weekend.
Yeah.
The Ferris State, Grand Valley State game. I'm not sure how to watch that. It's like some subscription service. Hopefully you can watch that game for free. If not, that's a bummer because that game's going to be good. So there's really good smaller level football games this weekend. So check that out for a former D3 player, former FCS player, and a former high school bench warmer. We all love the smaller levels of college football. You guys have anything else you guys want to add before we wrap? I'm going to take that as a no. We'll be back next week at some point. We're only going to do one show because it's Thanksgiving week. So we'll probably be back on Tuesday to recap week 12, preview rivalry week. God, it's such a hard thing to say.
I know.
Come up with a better way to the rivalry slate. So that way easier to say. So we'll be back at some point next week. We'll figure that out. We appreciate everybody tuning in. For Matt, for Phil, I'm Dan. Good luck with your bets, everybody. We will talk to you guys later.